Thank you all for tuning in to another episode hosted by Institute for Greatness, where this channel is created for you to achieve breakthroughs. Embrace that roadblock as a checkpoint, be proud of those mistakes as inspirations, and instill you with insights that will help you take concrete action to transform yourself. It's for you to truly experience that success is a choice that anybody can make. Well, today we have another very special guest, Chris Ye, somebody that many of you may have heard of already. He's based in the Bay Area, but is the author of multiple books, an instructor at Stanford University, a successful employee turned serial entrepreneur who has exited multiple companies. He's also the founder of venture capital firm Blitzscaling Ventures. I met Chris at an organization that was designed just for exit founders as he was sharing his book, Blitzscaling, which is a must read for anyone looking to build massively valuable companies in the shortest amount of time. And today he's here to share with you so many secrets and what it truly takes to be successful. So welcome, Chris. It's always great to see another Southern Californian.
Likewise, Anthony. It's a pleasure to be on.
Well, I'm sure there's so many questions I want to ask, and hopefully I can get them all in the amount of time that we have. But to start off with, given you've accomplished so much in life, from assuming senior positions in corporate world to founding multiple companies, and then now running a venture capital firm, speaking on stage, being a dad, husband, etc., right? How has your illustrious career aligned with your personal values and purpose?
Well, that's an incredibly good question because a lot of times people just focus on the markers of success. They don't stop to ask themselves, is this what I actually want? And so what's really important is how what I've done has really reflected what I view as what's most important in life. So there are a couple things that I want to mention. On the broad sense, one of the things that is very true is that we've actually studied human happiness now as a species, and we know what makes people happy. And the broad things that you really need to do to be happy are to have great relationships with the people you care about, to feel like you have a sense of personal growth and learning, however you want to frame it, and then finally to feel like you're contributing to something greater than yourself, giving back. Those are great things that anyone should do. But then the question becomes, how do I translate that into how I live my life? And in the book, The Startup of You, we actually talk about me and my mission in life. And I created a mission statement for myself. This is probably over 20 years ago now. And I've tried to stick with that mission statement and steer my career in accordance to it. And my mission statement is I help interesting people do interesting things. And it's a very simple statement, but it really encompasses what I've done. I want to help interesting people, which means that, of course, I'm willing to do the work myself, but I don't need to get the credit for it. I'm willing to just help other people who are going to go on to do amazing things. And there is that element of curiosity that's implied by saying that things are interesting. Interesting is kind of subjective. But really, what it comes down to is people are doing things that are new or novel or complicated or counterintuitive or something along those lines. So you can view all the things I've done through the lens of helping interesting people do interesting things.
Has that mission statement been refined over the years since it was written 20 years ago?
Nope, it's been the same the entire time. It's a nice open mission statement, which has meant that I haven't had to change it.
That's great to hear. And I'm very flattered that you're giving me the time today to be on my podcast because it implies that maybe I'm interesting enough for you to dedicate
Absolutely.
your time to this.
No, both you, it implies that you are interesting. It implies that the people who are listening to this podcast are also interesting. And
Hmm.
I don't know how it will eventually come back to me, but I hope that someday, and this does happen, by the way, I might be somewhere in the world and maybe I'll be waiting for a subway car, maybe I'll be at a conference and the person may, or maybe I'll be at a dinner and somebody will come to me and say, I heard you speak on Anthony's podcast and it really made a difference. And I love hearing those
Hmm.
stories.
Right. Yes. That is one reason why we get up excited about what we do. Because on that point, I want to talk about ask the next question, which is on time.
Hmm.
How do you manage your time? Because you do so many things. So it would be great to kind of share your typical day.
So it's very difficult to say that any day is typical because it really depends on if I'm traveling or not. If I'm traveling, as you know, the day could be occupied in any number of ways. And usually when I am traveling, it's pretty busy. There'll be a conference, there'll be additional meetings, there'll be a whole long list of things I'm trying to do. And it'll be a day that occupies me all the way until right before going to bed when I'll probably fall asleep without enough done. But what I will say is this something that is true about when I'm traveling. One of the things I try to do is I try to, whenever possible, either before I go to bed that night or before the event starts the next day, complete the work of connecting with people on LinkedIn, responding to all the people who connected with me on LinkedIn or WhatsApp or what have you, in order to make sure that I've actually gotten back to them. Because what I found is once that day has passed, trying to be able to remember and go back is almost impossible. So that reflects an interesting prioritization, which is relationship building and responding to
Mm.
the people I've connected with that day. In many ways, it's a way to codify the relationship or establish the context for the relationship so that we can do other things together in the future. Now, when I'm at home, I'll go through the more conventional question, which is people will ask, well, what usually happens during the day? Well, usually I'll get up and pretty much the first thing I'll do is to make myself some coffee to drink because caffeine is very important in order to get the brain working as effectively as possible. I actually tend to drink cold coffee. Like I make coffee, but then I ice it down or cool it down because I like to, I take vitamins and supplements and things like that, and it's a lot easier to swallow with cold water than it is to swallow with warm water. During the mornings, often have a lot of work to do that has to do with the venture capital fund. That's because, among other things, one of my partners is on the East Coast, but also, we're dealing with folks who are all over the world. And so, if I'm talking with someone in Europe or the Middle East, the morning is pretty much the only time I can do it. So
Mm.
mornings are often occupied with these kinds of meetings. And then, I will take a break. I usually don't, when I'm at home, I tend not to eat a traditional lunch. I try to do some more intermittent fasting type things. So I drink some bone broth. I might have some hemp heart seeds or something like that, that is, very low carb. And then in the afternoon, there may be meetings, or maybe I'll actually have a chance to make progress on something. So that might be time that I'm set aside to working on an essay or working on a project. For example, recently I had to send in my passport application because my passport's expiring at the end of next December. But there are a lot of places in the
Mm.
world where they won't let you in if your passport expires within 6 months. So you really can't wait until
Mm.
the end. That actually
Yep.
takes some time. You got to take a photograph and all that sort of thing. But that is part of my philosophy, which is look, if there's something you need to do, you just got to do it. And there may be a lot of steps involved, and you just try to plod through those steps, even if they're as silly as, convincing, getting your wife to take your photograph. And she actually did this. She found an app that like sized the photograph according to U.S. passport requirements. Then I had the
Right.
Walgreens print out some copies, and then I cut it with a pair of scissors and attached it and stapled it to my application. I mean, life is not so glamorous sometimes. But then there's
Mm.
also the other things which might be going on stage and speaking to people, recording a podcast. I usually do a number of calls every day. Could be with entrepreneurs, could be with investors or other folks like that. Again, trying to help them, trying to find a way to help them do something interesting, or perhaps just
Mm.
building that relationship.
Mm. Right. And how does the whole family time then come in during the week?
Yeah, so my kids are grown, so it's not as big a focus for me as it used to be. Before, when the
Mm.
kids were younger, there would be taking the kids to various activities. We would often do like a family game night on Wednesday nights and things like that. These days the kids are grown. My wife and I have time that we're able to spend together, like taking our dog for a walk. That's a good anchor point because it is something that you have to do without fail pretty much. And so it's a great way to make sure you spend time together. But then, we'll see. what other sorts of family time? Obviously, meals and things like that. What's nice sometimes is to be able to go for a walk or go for some sort of activity. All of those are good. I think that when it comes to family time, it's usually not just, hey, we have this hour scheduled to sit down face to face. It's more like, hey, we're doing something together. Saturday mornings,
Right.
we go shopping for all the food and supplies for the week. There are all these, we might have to, do something like go out and work in the garden or help clear stuff out of the garage. And that's family time as well.
Mm. And it's great to hear from somebody like you because you're so you have so many things going on, so successful, but yet in a sense, it's very you do things that a lot of ordinary people do. People who are very grounded, like go to the market,
Yeah.
you still have to take photos,
Now
you
again,
walk your dog.
I'm a very ordinary person. There are folks who have reached a rarefied air where they probably can't go to the market because they'll be mobbed by people. Fortunately, I don't have to worry about that yet. I
Well,
will
people
say
always
that
say
something
the
funny
best.
did
Yeah.
happen. Last night, I went to
Mm.
In and Out. So my
Uh
nephew and
huh.
his wife were visiting, and everyone wanted In and Out for dinner. So we went to In and Out, and we were waiting in line at In and Out. And I was just getting ready to pay when somebody in the line next to me said, "Hey, Chris!" And it turns out it was a friend of mine, Amr Awadallah, who's the founder of Cloudera. And so I was distracted for a second, and my nephew took advantage of that to pay for the dinner instead of me. So. But that's an example of, yeah, you know what? Everyone goes out. Here I am. I'm out at In and Out trying to get a hamburger animal style and other food for my family. And there's my friend who is the founder of Cloudera, a publicly traded company, a big time executive at Google and also an entrepreneur and investor. And he's getting food at In and Out too. Everyone just lives their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's great being in Silicon Valley because you have all these millionaires, billionaires just wearing flip flops and tank top and walking around, right?
Exactly.
Going in and out. So next, I want to learn a bit more about your career as an author.
Hmm.
You've written quite a few books, and I can see in your background your the Blitzscaling that's in the back.
Yes.
So for those who haven't purchased your book, can you give a quick 1 minute recap of it?
The 1 minute recap of Blitzscaling is that the world's most valuable companies have been built primarily in the technology industry, primarily with one overall approach, which is blitzscaling. And the goal with blitzscaling is to prioritize speed in order to win a valuable winner take most market. And so the companies that win their markets, and they, especially when they're a winner take most market where there's a standard or a network effect or something like that, are the most valuable companies in the world. And you can just look at the most valuable companies in the world and see that they are all blitzscalers who did this. Nvidia, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Amazon, they all fit Apple. They all fit into this category. And so blitzscaling explains that and then explains how to do it.
Hmm. Hmm. But it's the also the premise is that these companies, when they start off as a startup, is that they will be able to raise funding and continue to raise funding because they're going to lose money, right? Like the whole.
In some
I mean,
cases,
we're not going to talk about
absolutely.
specific companies.
That's
Okay,
one of the reasons
so that
why.
has to be intact.
That's right. And that's one of the reasons why it's been easier to blitzscale in Silicon Valley than other places. It's not because there are smarter people
Hmm.
here, although there's plenty of smart people here. It's that the companies exist within an ecosystem with capital markets that allow them to pursue this more aggressive strategy, which produces great long term results.
Hmm. Okay. On and then on your writing journey, are there any plans to write a book in the near term?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we're recording this in December of 2025. And next month,
Hmm.
January 2025, Reid Hoffman and I are going to start working on the sequel to Blitzscaling, which has the working title
Oh.
Blitzscaling and AI. Because when we wrote Blitzscaling and we published it in 2018, this was before the whole AI revolution. It's a whole 4 years plus before ChatGPT came out. So we feel like it's a perfect time to come back around and talk about how blitzscaling has changed in the age of AI, how blitzscaling applies to the age of AI, because there's a whole new group of entrepreneurs who are trying to figure out how this is all going to work. And of course, Reid is at the center of things again, since he's the founding board member of OpenAI and one of its largest investors, and of course, a board member at Microsoft. So, he's at the center of the AI industry.
Wow. Can't wait for that book to be released. So, audience, you've heard it. You've got to buy number one, Blitzscaling, and then the sequel to Blitzscaling. Let's talk a little bit about Blitzscaling Ventures then.
Mhm.
What are you investing in?
So, as you can imagine, our goal is to invest in companies that will successfully blitzscale. Now, this is not easy because guess what? Startups in general aren't easy. Most of them
Mm,
fail, or at least fail to deliver the kinds of insane returns that everyone dreams of. And so we are necessarily making some educated guesses about whether the companies are going to succeed. But what we do is we look at the markets they're tackling and try to figure out, is this really a winner take most market? Is this a market where there's going to be one winner that really dominates and where that market is enormously valuable? And the second thing we look at is, do we think that this company can be the winner? Do they have the skills, the abilities, the resources to grow and outgrow the competition, to be the one that achieves market leadership and maintains that market leadership for years or even decades? So naturally, we're doing a lot of work with those companies. We're talking with the founders, we're talking with customers. But at the end of the day, it is an educated guess. Our goal with Blitzscaling Ventures is not that all the companies we invest in will succeed. We'd love for that to be true, but that's impossible. Nobody has that kind of track record in venture. By definition, you're trying to do something new, and most of the times it's not going to work. But what we do want with
mm.
Blitzscaling Ventures is when it does work, for those outcomes to be much larger than average. So to invest in the iconic companies of tomorrow, the most valuable companies that exist, that's what our focus is.
Okay. In terms of industries, then, what are some of the industries that can blitzscale aside from, say, AI?
Yeah. Well, of course, we're primarily focused on the technology industry. Now, the reason why that is true is two reasons. First of all, the technology industry, because of the internet, because of mobile, has a lot of interconnectivity. We talk about network
Mm,
effects being important. Well, network effects can only exist when there are networks. And we talk about virality being important. Virality can only exist when people are in connection with each other, again, as a part of a network. And so technology tends to have the characteristics that blitzscale more than most other industries. But it's not necessarily limited to technology and not even limited to software. One of the examples that we
mm,
use in the book is we talk about the company that most people know as Zara, because that's the brand
mhm.
name of the clothing store, but is actually called Inditex. And it's a company that is one of the most valuable companies in the world, not because of technology, but because of its approach to the fashion industry, which is very different than its competitors.
Okay. So sometimes it's not about, as you said, not just the technology, but it's the philosophy
Yeah.
in tackling an issue or a problem.
Correct. Now, again, the reason why it tends to be technology is because of those networks, and also because new technologies create new markets, right? A market is essentially an economic equilibrium. Well, new technologies
Mm,
disturb that equilibrium and create opportunities for new markets. If there's no technological innovation, if there's no change, why don't people just keep using the same thing? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So technology does the breaking, and then technology does the fixing.
that's a good point. I like that. Technology doesn't. Okay. And when you look at founders, because you mentioned earlier, like, do they have the ability? Can they scale? Can they succeed? What are some of the key traits you look at in terms of being successful, or if there are just any deal breakers? The moment you see them, you're like, nah, just gonna walk away.
Well, I
What
think
are
that
some of those?
the obvious deal breaker is if they're dishonest or you can't trust them, because it won't matter how successful they are. If you can't trust them, they're just going to steal your money anyways. But the
Mm,
characteristics you look for, there are obvious ones that everyone would look for. You're looking for people who are smart and hardworking. That's pretty obvious. But there's a couple of ones that are less obvious that people really need to look for as well. One is the ability to convince other people to join your cause. I know that people say that in the future we're going to have AI companies where one person or zero people are going to drive a multi-billion-dollar company. Maybe we'll get there. But historically, if you want to build a great company, you have to convince other people to join you. And so your ability to
mm,
persuade others to join your cause is really critical. The second thing is you need the ability to actually learn not just from your successes, but learn to unlearn the lessons of success. So one of the things that often trips up companies is they start off and they see some initial success, and the founder says, I figured out the formula. Let me just keep doing this. But the fact is, the world is constantly changing. And in fact, your company itself is changing. The challenges you face change as the company scales. And so if you are trying to apply the techniques of running a 10-person company to running a 1,000-person company, you're not going to work.
Mm.
And so a lot
Mm.
of times founders, if they let their successes become a part of their identity, they don't want to give up and stop doing the things that made them successful. But what they need to understand is those things made them successful then. They may not make them successful now. So we look for founders who really think carefully about what they actually are doing. Instead of just saying, well, I did it before it worked, I'm going to do it now. They actually think about
Mm.
what makes sense, and they're willing to change and do things differently if that's what it takes to win.
Okay. So it's the concept that what got you there or what got you here may not get you there in the future.
Absolutely. The old
So
Marshall
how do you think
Goldsmith
about that?
saying, which we actually wrote a foreword for one of Marshall's latest books. So, yes, that's
Oh
very
wow,
appropriate.
that's great. And just to digress a little bit, right?
Hmm.
I asked this. The next question I asked could be a little bit sensitive in a sense that because we're both kind of Chinese American, and
Yeah.
we think about, and I'm based in Asia, you're now in the U.S. People always think about pedigree and
Mm,
say, oh, you went to a great university, you went
yes.
worked at a great firm, great bank, and like in Asia, it's a really important thing,
True.
right? And when people look at, oh, okay, that's the first thing they look at. It's not, I'm not going to consider, right? I mean, growing up in the U.S., I feel that I feel people care more about the, the character, the personality, and all and work ethic more than just the tagline, right, the resume.
That's
But
right.
like, how do you really look at some of these founders when they come in and say, okay, you know what, I'm a dropout, or like I didn't go to a top
Yeah.
school, and how do you evaluate that?
Well, again, the way I like to think about it is simple. So obviously the pedigree helps, right? Pedigree in terms of the right schools or working at companies that have been successful. There's no question that it's helpful, right? If somebody asks, should I obtain that pedigree? I'm like, yeah, if all other things being equal, absolutely. But it's not the only way to be successful. And so what I tell founders is, look, pedigree will only get you so far. Obviously, life is easier with a pedigree. But if you have a pedigree and you don't deliver, you're not going to be successful. So if you don't have that
Mm,
pedigree, yeah, it's harder. You've got to actually deliver. You've got to actually show those results. But you know what? The people with the pedigree would have to do that at some point in time, anyways. So don't get hung up on the fact that it's harder for you. Instead, go into
mm,
industries like the startup world or places like Silicon Valley where it doesn't matter quite as much. It's always going to matter, but there's
mm.
plenty of ways to build an enormously valuable company through entrepreneurship. You mentioned, we're both Chinese American. Somebody who is Chinese is Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, and he was an English teacher. He didn't really have a great
Hmm.
pedigree or connections or anything like that when he started out, but he was able to build one of the most valuable companies in his country.
Yeah, no, that's very right, and yeah, hopefully there will be more examples of the Jack Ma's,
Yes.
which is it will be very inspiring. And then just one more point on what you said earlier, right? Which is one of the key traits you look for is the ability for a founder to convince people to follow their cause,
Yes.
which sounds like that is a crux of being a good leader, is to get people to all jump onto the same boat.
Well, that's
So
one
how do
element of
you, yeah,
leadership.
that,
Obviously, if you can get
yeah,
people to
one,
join your
let's say
cause, that's
important
great. You might be leading them into an iceberg, in which case, I don't know if you're a great leader.
one. That is true, but if you're still able to convince people to follow you to an iceberg, that's pretty incredible skill to have, right? Or like, we use example, people are fighting for something and they're willing to sacrifice their lives for a
Yeah.
purpose or something. Like, that is pretty incredible. But on this point, how do you evaluate that ability? Because is this something you can just see over a few meetings, or is this something you have to monitor over a long period of time?
I think it's both. I think that, again, there's one founder that we're investing in that we spoke to recently where he's just phenomenally charismatic and persuasive. And this is something where it's
Mm,
like, okay, he has the ability to persuade us. He is already persuading other people. He has the ability to persuade. So we believe in that. But I think the other element of it is proof is in the pudding. So I'm looking for someone who's able to be able to convince people to join their cause. All right, let me see the kind of people who follow the leader. Right?
Mm,
You judge a leader based on their followers. If they cannot attract great followers, then it's hard to view them as a great leader.
I like that. Yes, leadership is determined by the followers,
Yeah.
not what the leader says or what they claim to be able to do.
You can make
That's
all the
great.
wonderful speeches you want, but if it does not result in great followers and success, then what's the point?
I yeah, totally agree with that. Okay, well let's move on to our next question, which is so you're a Stanford instructor. I know that's where you went for undergrad.
Hmm.
You're teaching people in Silicon Valley how Silicon Valley companies navigate rapid scaling from dorm room to global giants. So my first question is, how did you become a Stanford instructor?
Excellent question. Well, you could say that I began the process back when I was still at Stanford. So I was fortunate enough to have actually been an undergraduate instructor back when I was an undergraduate. So in a couple of different areas. So there is a class at Stanford focused on peer counseling. There's actually a student-run peer counseling center that has been around for many decades. And I took that class, and then they said, "Hey, might you be interested in helping to teach the class?" Because a lot
Hmm.
of the teaching is done. I mean, it's essentially a student taught program. There is a faculty supervisor, but the students do all the teaching. And so I said, yeah, that's interesting to me. And so I took the class in order to train and become a instructor for that class, and then taught the class for a couple of terms. Same thing held true for the public speaking program that the engineering department ran. So I took that class, and they said, "Hey, might you be interested in teaching this class?" And so I took another class, and then I taught that class for another couple of terms as well. So, and I also earlier, even before those, I was actually a writing tutor for the structured liberal education program that both Reid Hoffman and I were a part of when we were freshmen, albeit 5 years apart, because
Hmm.
Reid's a bit older than me. And so I had already been teaching throughout my time as an undergraduate. And so
Hmm.
what then ended up happening from there is just trying to find the right opportunity to teach again. And so the Blitzscaling class came about because Reid wanted to teach a class on campus. He correctly believed that if we taught the class at Stanford, not only would it give us a lot of credibility, it would also give him an easier time bringing some of the most famous entrepreneurs in the world to our classroom to speak. And so for that original Stanford class, Reid was able to bring in people like Eric Schmidt of Google, Reed Hastings of Netflix, as well as some young up and comers that not everyone knew at the time, like Brian Chesky of Airbnb and Patrick Collison of Stripe. So it was quite a lineup
Oh.
of folks, and it was helped by the fact that we were teaching at Stanford. That was also helped by the fact that we were able to partner with one of the faculty members, a gentleman by the name of Mehran Sahami, who at the time was a computer science professor and today is the chairman of the computer science department at Stanford. And the amazing thing is that
Hmm.
Mehran was one of Reid's classmates back when he was an undergraduate, and then he was one of my instructors as a graduate student when I was at Stanford.
Hmm.
So those relationships go back a long time.
How much time do you have to commit to being an instructor?
So it
Is this
depends
like
on if
a
you're teaching a full
ongoing class?
class or if you're
Hmm.
teaching, occasional classes and guest lectures. Most of the time, that's what Reid and I do. Guest lectures and guest appearances, specific modules within somebody else's class. That's so much easier. When we actually taught
Hmm. Okay.
Blitzscaling, that was when we did a full course, which meant committing to the entire quarter, which meant having TAs, teaching assistants, to help us with this, which meant assigning homework and grading and all of that. And that took a lot more time. To teach a class at Stanford, even a class which is, being done for like a single unit and thus is not as intense as like teaching, uh, intro to electrical engineering or something like that, even that probably took somewhere around 20 hours a week of work. So it was a lot.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Incredible. It's just incredible to hear that you were already an instructor in undergrad to other undergrads,
And grad students as
right?
well.
Because I was like, you got to have a lot of confidence, not only just teaching your own peers, but people older than you at that age, right?
Yeah,
So that's
it was a good experience. I mean, again, when we taught, especially public speaking, there would be, business school students, and they were coming there in their mid to late 20s or even early 30s, and they had various accomplishments, but we were their instructors. And in general, they did treat us with respect, so I always appreciated that.
mm, that's incredible. So just a little bit more about being an instructor,
Hmm.
right? Because we talked about navigate rapid scaling from dorm room to global giant. Can you give an example or some kind of anecdote? Because a lot of people, okay, well, everybody reads about the Amazon story
Yep.
and Facebook. We all started in dorm room or garages. Oh, become this, $1 trillion company, right? And clearly, we know it doesn't happen that often. But how does it actually work in real life? Because we're not shadowing the Zuckerbergs and Bezos of the world on a daily basis, right? So when you teach it, like, how do you do that?
Well, when you teach it, what you do is you teach them the principles. Obviously, we're not able to be with all the students one on one. Like with the Blitzscaling class, we had like 100 students. So the amount of personal time we could devote to them was somewhat limited. So our goal was to be able to A, give them principles they could leverage, and then B, part of the joy of a class is you bring together all of these people with a similar interest, and we encourage them to work together in groups and to find ways to help each other. And then as for, going from dorm room to global giant, I mean, this has happened, ironically enough, so many times at Stanford, whether it was,
Mm,
of course, a lot of people remember Jerry Yang and Dave Filo of Yahoo, or Larry Page and Sergey Brin of Stanford.
mm-hmm.
And there's just, always another generation that is living in the same dormitories. I don't know why they don't update the dormitories. The dormitories for undergrads are still the same terrible dorms I lived in. And yet somehow the environment allows people to do some pretty amazing things.
Well, maybe the more rundown it is, the more driven you are. Otherwise, if it's so comfortable,
It
you're just
could very
chilling
well be.
all the
Yeah,
time in your dorm
exactly.
room.
We're stuck in these crumbling old dormitories. We've got to find a way out of this place.
What are the key principles then to scale? Besides what you talked about previously when you talked
Yeah,
about your
so I
book.
think that the one of the things we talk about is it's really important to think big. And it doesn't mean that you have to act big from the beginning, because obviously you have to find success at a smaller scale to grow. But we find that the people who reach these huge successes often are thinking big from the very beginning. Somebody like
Mm,
Patrick Collison, for example, or Larry Page, they were thinking big right from the start. For Larry Page, for example, you remember Google's mission to organize and understand the world's information. That's a gigantic vision.
mm,
When Reed met with the founders of Airbnb, they said, we want to be the eBay for all the space that's not being used right now. Right? It takes a big vision in order to start. And again, sometimes people don't feel comfortable having a big vision. They feel more comfortable, like, oh, let me have a little modest vision. I'm like, it's fine to have a modest vision for today, but build
mm.
that big vision for tomorrow, for the ultimate success that you're looking for, because that's what all your investors and other folks are eventually looking for as well.
Okay. That's actually a great point you bring out. It's just you have to think big at the
Yeah.
beginning, or at least quite early on, because yeah, it's not natural. I think a lot of people also don't want to think big because they're afraid to fail. In a sense, oh, I never achieved that. I only got here,
Yeah.
even though it's pretty successful. But they'd be like, oh well, I want to be more modest. And then the other thing is just more in terms of personality trait, because having been exit founders ourselves, and I always have a discussion with people on this, which is some people really like to have control,
Yes.
and that's usually the case for entrepreneurs. Right? We become entrepreneurs because we want control over something, time
Right.
or whatever it is. But as you scale, naturally you need to start delegating,
Yeah.
right? Because you can't do everything yourself. You can't work in the business. You work on a business.
Yeah.
So how do you actually balance that? Like I want control, but I know I have to give up control to scale.
So I think you have to understand ultimately the control is an illusion. Like we think that we have control. We never truly have control. Nothing is ever fully in our control. People become an entrepreneur because like, I'm sick of working for a boss. I'm going to work for myself and I'm going to be in control. I'm like, no, you're not. You're beholden to customers. You're beholden to suppliers. You're beholden to employees. There is no way to get ultimate
Mm.
control. I mean, maybe if you are a quantitative trader or something like that, you can build something that is purely a single person company that controls it. But most of us can't.
So it's very interesting, Chris, the way you put it, that control is an illusion. So it sounds like a lot of these founders have to reframe their mindset because they first start out being founders because they want control. But then you have to, or they need to realize, or you need to educate them that, you know what? It's actually an illusion. You're going to let go.
That's right, because ultimately the goal shouldn't be control. That control is an illusion. The goal should be maximize the chances of success, having an impact, making a difference.
Hmm.
And that involves taking risks. That involves making sure things that are sometimes out of your control. That involves delegating and trusting others. And all those you can't do if you're just trying to tightly grip onto control above everything else.
Mm, I agree with that. That's a good, very good lesson for the audience. Well, you spent many years as an employee as well in the earlier part of your career. You were at DE Shaw, I believe you're also at Target, before making that leap to become an entrepreneur. For anybody looking to make that jump from employee to entrepreneur, what is the advice you have for them?
So I think that, it is very valuable to actually get experience as an employee. Because if you have never worked in a larger company, you'll have no idea how the processes actually work. And sometimes you'll see founders, they'll say, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, yeah, well, there's a lot of things in the life that don't make sense. The question is your understanding allowing you to predict what will actually happen? Are you able to pull the levers and get the results you want? So I think that when people are like, oh, I'm so eager, I just want to drop out of school and start a company. Look, if you have a super compelling opportunity, drop out of school, start the company.
Mm,
But don't do it because you think, oh, well, dropping out is how the most successful entrepreneurs made it happen. Like, no, they had a super compelling opportunity and therefore they dropped out. It wasn't dropping out that made them successful. If not, go see the other millions upon millions of dropouts and ask them how that went. So
mm,
the core idea is if you don't have a better idea, I think it's a great idea to work for someone else, to learn. And by the way, it's not bad to get paid either. The time I spent at DE Shaw, I think really helped in so many ways. I learned about how companies work. I also learned, how to work with other people in a professional setting, not inconsiderable. And I built a lot of great connections for the future.
mm,
So I think that those are all great things. Now, how you prepare yourself, don't think of yourself just as an employee. If you think of yourself just as an employee, you're focused on things like, well, how do I get the best possible performance review? How do I get the best possible raise?
mm,
Those are good things to get. But what's more important is to say, what are the skills I'm developing? What is the network I'm building that's going to be useful to me when I'm an entrepreneur? And so, even if you're an employee working for someone else, you can still have the mindset of an entrepreneur, still be thinking about how you are actually going to build your assets and build your opportunities for the future.
okay. So it's the entrepreneurial mindset that's the key.
Yes.
And sometimes, yeah, it is totally fine to be an employee as long as you still have that entrepreneurial mindset or you're working in an environment that fosters an entrepreneurial culture.
Exactly.
Okay. The next question is about exit founders because you and I are both exit founders. You've exited a
Yes.
lot more companies. But one question a lot of
One or two. It's just a
yeah,
couple. It's
yeah,
it's
a couple good ones. Uh, so a lot of business owners ask, "Oh, I want to exit, but is this something that you have to deliberately plan early on, or is it by chance?" I bring that up because
yeah.
sometimes you deal with business owners who are, oh, I don't even have audited financials after like 3 years. Oh, I'm gonna think about an exit. Or, oh, nothing is
Yeah.
automated, or I'm still doing like a lot of grunt work and things. And so, but they're all once I want to exit, then I can always transform and do all that stuff, right? Like, so how do you balance all that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I do think that if you are looking to exit, you do have to think about it in advance. Now, the first thing is people like to say companies are bought, not sold. So just because you want an exit doesn't mean that you can get an exit. And so don't get the misapprehension that you can just engineer an exit no matter what. However, if you are interested in an exit, then obviously there are things like you described, like financials, actual financials that other people will believe in that are really important. And the reason you have to do that before the time that you're looking to exit is obviously your acquirer is going to want to see several years worth of financials to understand the business. And if you're like, oh, let me sell the company, let me just start getting professional financials now. Okay, it's going to take a couple of years. You're going to have to wait. And so
Mm,
you should think about that in advance. The other element of it is, let's say you're selling your business. Let's say it's not like a technology business, it's just a regular business. Well, how is the acquirer going to operate it? If the only way to operate it is by having you on board, you may think, oh, that's great. They have to pay me. I'm like, no, it's not. You sold your company. You're still doing the work. So you got, yeah, financial benefit, but you didn't get the freedom you were looking for. So
mm,
if you believe you want to sell your company, you have to think about, how do I document? How do I delegate? How do I make it so that I don't have to keep running this thing even after I sell it?
mm. And I think that's a hurdle. It's a challenge a lot of business owners don't think about, and because they just
Yeah.
feel, oh, I'll deal with that later. I'm so busy just trying to get by the day to day.
Yeah, and
And
look, they're not entirely wrong. If you spend all your time thinking about the exit when your business is still struggling, that's probably a bad idea too.
mm,
But the fact remains, if you take care of the business, if you build up a great business, it's generating cash flow, it's generating profits, you still need to do the other work to exit successfully. Just having a great business is not enough, because you may know it's a great business, but how is your buyer going to know that?
mm, yeah, that's a very good point. And you made a good point, right? It's not about selling a business; it's about people buying a business.
Yeah.
And as both you and I exit founders, we realize it's not easy to exit, especially for private companies.
No, it is not, and sometimes you try hard, you go through a process, and it still doesn't happen, and then sometimes it just magically walks in the front door. It's a crazy world.
So when you sign on a dotted line to sell the company, and then say a few months later the deal closes and the money hits your bank account, what is that emotion that you go through? Because a lot of people always say like, oh, the climax is about that exit, it's having that that
Yeah.
money in the account, but then somehow people still go and still hustle like mad afterwards. Right? Like, so how important it really is that money and that feeling of like, yes, I did it.
So I think it is really important. And let's not ignore the fact that money is valuable. It's something that gives us a lot more options. It's something that takes away a lot of risks in life. It's one of the great risk mitigation strategies in general. So you should feel good when your company exits and you see that money hit the account. I know I felt the first time I had an exit and I saw that money hit my account, I was very happy. And I jokingly say I probably felt richer than I ever did in my life, because again, it's a changed circumstance. But you get used to that extra money pretty quickly, and then at some point you're like, oh no, I don't feel that rich at all, because I realize there's so many other expenses and other things like that. So I think you should go ahead and take the time and celebrate, no question, but recognize that there is a hedonic treadmill when it comes to money,
Mm,
and that the exact amount of money, as my friend Ramit Sethi says in his podcast, Money for Couples, the exact amount of money in your bank account is not heavily correlated to how you feel about money.
mm,
So what I would say is, normal folks, not entrepreneurs who exit, go through a series of things, right? If you are struggling to actually pay the bills, that is a tough existence. And then when you get to the point where you're not struggling to pay the bills, that's going to feel great.
mm,
But then you would say to yourself, well, what's the next step after that? Oh, maybe I want to buy a house, or I want to put
mm,
away money for college for my kids. And then you work really hard to achieve those. And when you achieve those, you feel really, really happy.
mm,
And then you're like, well, what else is there? And eventually you get to the point where you think, oh, I would like to have enough money saved up for my retirement. Then you achieve that goal. You say, oh, well, but it would be great if I had enough money so I never had to worry about working again. Then you achieve that goal. And then you say, well, it would be nice to fly a private jet. There's no stopping it. There's no end to it. There's always another level. Eventually you're like, I want to build my own rocket company, right? That's what it seems like the super rich get up to. So the message I want to deliver to you about the exit is, yes, celebrate, feel good, recognize that there's always more money out there, and you could end up going back there for money. I don't want entrepreneurs to go back out and say, I'm going to start another company just to get more money because I don't have enough. I want entrepreneurs to say, if I want to start another company, it's because that's what I really want to do. That's the thing that I would do regardless. And the fact that I don't have to worry about my day-to-day cash needs will allow me to throw myself into it even further. It should not be, I need more, because you know what? You'll never have enough.
Yeah.
Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. He still wants more.
Yeah, that's a good point. You will never have enough. And that's why the first question I asked you was your values and your purpose, because it sounds like at the end of the day, yes, you feel happy, but happy for how long? And then at the end, you still go back to the basic, which is, okay, so this is my values and purpose. So you continue to do other things, and money is not the primary driver.
Yeah. I'm very proud of my achievements, and they make me happy, but they're not the reason I'm happy. I'm happy because I'm living the life that I think I should lead, and because going all the way back to that very first question, I have good relationships with people I care about. I'm always learning and growing, and I do things to give back to something larger than myself. And because I do those three things, I'm happy.
Yeah, and yeah, I think a lot of people should hopefully, after watching this, can learn from you. Also realize that there are different ways to happiness. It's not about, it's not linear. A lot of people think it's linear. It's money, promotion, title, right? But yeah, I mean, that's why we have you here to share your thoughts on how to achieve that fulfillment and happiness. And so just the last question is, and again, thank you so much for your time, is that, so you've done so much throughout your illustrious career, but can you share with us some of the key lowlights? So people understand that, you know what, it's not always glamorous. People always see in the headlines, oh, this guy's so successful, but what really are the lowlights, and how did you overcome them?
Absolutely. There are many occasions when it was tough, and it took many years. It'll take longer than you like in most cases. Some people might get lucky. I wasn't one of those. So there are so many lowlights I can think of. When I started my first company, we started it during the dot-com boom, but we were unable to exit before the stock market crashed. And I always remember in December of 2000 going to a board meeting and hearing my board members say, this is like a nuclear winter out there. We've got to hunker down. You have to fire almost everyone. You've got to take whatever money you have left and make it last as long as possible. And that's a tough message to hear right before Christmas, to say, oh, I got to go out there. I got to fire 90% of my staff, and right before Christmas. It's awful. It's an awful feeling. That was a low light. Another low light that I can recall happening is, again, the market cycles are what they are, and there was one of the companies that I was deeply involved with. I won't say. It looked like we were going to be acquired by a major corporation outside the United States for a very good price, and things got very far along, and then they ended up not happening. We were eventually able to sell years later, but for only a fraction of what that deal would have produced. And of course, at that time, we didn't even know that we'd ever be able to sell, that we'd be able to make that happen. So, losing that kind of potential exit, that felt really horrendously bad. And so, I've been through many of these things. There was a company I sat on the board of. My friend was tired of running the company. And so we put together a process, and we brought in some bankers, and we ran a process to find a buyer. And after 6 months, we were like, we can't find a buyer. There's nothing we can do here. That was a tough feeling. Things worked out there because about 3 months later, unexpectedly, a buyer appeared and said, "Hey, we're interested in buying your company," which is why I'm like, you know what? We tried for 6 months to sell the company, and then somebody just bought it. But
Right.
again, those were various dark times along the way. And there are many times throughout my career when it was uncertain that it would ever happen for me. And it's important to note that if I take entrepreneurs through this math all the time, if you start a company, let's say you're fortunate enough to generate some interest and get venture capital funding for it, there's still only a 10% chance that that company is going to go on to deliver a great outcome for you. Most of the time, it's just not. It's going to bump along and eventually just die off. And so it's like going and rolling. It's like rolling dice, except every time you roll the dice, it's not, it doesn't cost you an ante. It costs you 4 years or 5 years of your life. And so you get to roll the dice maybe 5 or 6 times in your life. And if the die comes up 10, then you have your exit. And if it comes up anything else, it's, do you want to play again? And so it is entirely possible, if you go down the path of entrepreneurship, that it will take you multiple rolls of the dice. And it took me multiple rolls of the dice. I started my first company in 1999. I didn't get my first liquidity event until 2016. That's 17 years.
Yeah, so people can hear this and realize it is not as easy or as rosy as what the media portrays it to be.
There's a reason I've got gray hair. 17 years. And I had the best pedigree you can imagine, right? Stanford University, Harvard Business School. I worked for D.E. Shaw and Company.
Right. It still took 17 years.
It's hard.
So yeah. So, well, hopefully what Chris said doesn't discourage people, but actually make people realize to have a reality check. So, yeah, life is not supposed to be easy in many ways, because if it's easy, it's not really an interesting life to live. But at the same time, even as employees, right? It's people say, "Oh, it's always easier to be an employee," and then you just get fired or you get laid off. That's totally out of your control.
Absolutely. And despite all those hardships, again, I wasn't only happy after the exits came. I was happy before then. And that was something that I really wanted to focus on. I'm like, you know what? The most important things in life, money can't buy. And we can see that because we can see the richest people in the world try to buy those things and failing miserably. Right. So never forget that. Right. You should be happy throughout. Getting your exit, getting that wealth, it will enhance your happiness, no question. But if you're not happy before the money, you ain't got to be happy after you get it.
Oh, I like that. That's a good takeaway statement. Yeah, if you're not happy before the money, you won't be happy after getting it.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Chris. This is all the time we have today. Again, thank you so much for giving us all your valuable time. So remember to subscribe to this channel for more content on how you can become much more than you've been programmed to think. And remember, success is a choice. Anybody can. With that, thank you so much, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And as always, as is customary with podcasts, if you want to follow me and find out more about me, you can just find out all the information you need at chrisyeh.com. That's just CHRISYEH.com. That's the clearinghouse for everything.
You heard it. You know where to find Chris. So again, thank you, Chris. See ya. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. And